I found an article from 1934 with the craziest title, Lizard People's Catacomb City Hunted. Just listen to this first line. Busy Los Angeles, although little realizing it in the hustle and bustle of modern existence, stands above a lost city of catacombs filled with incalculable treasure and imperishable records of a race of humans further advanced intellectually and scientifically than even the highest type of present-day peoples. A lost city of catacombs beneath LA filled with treasure and records of a race of lizard people? It sounds unbelievable, but when I have a show called Metaphysical, I have to at least start looking deeper to see if there's more to this kind of story. That's when I found amazing information that was so mind-boggling I almost couldn't believe it. Yes, in 1934, an engineer found evidence of an ancient civilization when he dug beneath Los Angeles using sophisticated equipment. But if you go back further, Hopi Indians' own legends and prophecies corroborated what was found on radio X-rays at the time. Then I realized modern scientific discoveries added way more to the story, and finally, the history of LA itself got looped in. More and more was getting uncovered the more I dug. So I had to consider, could it be true? Could there be more to Hollywood than a land of swimming pools and movie stars? I realized that the real story here wasn't about lizard people at all. It was so much deeper, about humanity's true history that no one dares to recognize. I'm going to tell you all about it. Join me, Rob Counts, for a metaphysical episode about the ancient civilization beneath Los Angeles. G. Warren Shufelt was a geophysical mining engineer. He and his assistants dug a shaft 250 feet into the ground on North Hill Street in LA and planned to dig until they hit 1,000 feet. That's right near Sunset Boulevard in those beautiful California mountains, which I'll get back to in a little while. To me, this is a super random place to dig and think you're going to hit something significant. I mean, Tinseltown, Hollywood, the Dream Factory, it's all around you. Why would you think something's buried underground? Well, Shufelt had a radio X-ray that could detect minerals and tunnels below the surface, and it was showing him a pattern of catacombs and vaults that formed a lost city. But my question is, why call it a city? Well, this tunnel system was huge. Look at the area here, from the public library on West 5th Street to the Southwest Museum on Museum Drive to the foot of Mount Washington, and then where he dug on North Hill Street, seeing an entire city under there on your radio X-ray must have been incredible and shocking. Shufelt said, I knew I was over a pattern of tunnels, and I had mapped out the course of the tunnels, the position of large rooms scattered along the tunnel route, as well as the position of deposits of gold, but I couldn't understand the meaning of it. Yeah, what did it all mean? Well, Shufelt did what I would have done. He went to the oldest source he could find, hunting for whomever had records of the oldest history in the area. In 1934, that meant the Hopi Indian chief in Arizona, Little Chief Greenleaf. And the legend Greenleaf told him was astounding because after they were done talking, they both agreed that it aligned exactly with the physical evidence Shufelt found under LA. Want to hear the legend? The Hopi Indians in the 1930s preserved stories of a cataclysmic past. There were 3 lost cities along the Pacific coast, and the location of one had been dug by, quote, lizard people after a great catastrophe occurred 5,000 years ago. A huge tongue of fire several hundred miles wide had come out of the southwest, destroying all life in its path. And anticipating more fires, the people had dug a city underground trying to escape. But wait, how would that work logistically? Well, have you ever heard of the Channel? It connects England to France under the water today. Today we can bore holes and figure out how to properly ventilate too. But could people have done that in an ancient civilization as well? Hopi history said this lost city had been dug by a sophisticated race who wasn't just standing there swinging picks and shovels. Instead, they used, quote, powerful chemicals to dig their city, which drained into the ocean. When the tide passed in and out of the lower tunnels, it forced air into the upper tunnels. Genius, ventilating the entire system naturally, and according to legend, it cleansed and sanitized the lower tunnels too. Hopi Chief Greenleaf told Shufelt that above the city of Labyrinths, there were large rooms in the dorms of the hills that housed 1,000 families in the manner of tall buildings. Sounds like an ancient civilization apartment complex was actually inside those beautiful mountains of LA I was mentioning earlier. Greenleaf said they stored food supplies and herbs in their catacombs to provide sustenance for the lizard folk for great lengths of time as the next fire swept over the earth. Okay, let me stop here and think about this for a second. Wouldn't a huge labyrinth of cities fall apart if they were dug underground, even with powerful chemicals? Well, I guess it depends on the chemicals. We usually picture mud huts and primitive tools when we think of the past, but did you know that in ancient Rome, for example, they created a special concrete that could endure for thousands of years because it was self-healing? Yeah, self-healing. Scientists in 2017 cracked the code to the ancient recipe that most thought had been lost in time. Seawater mixed with other compounds and lime caused the growth of interlocking minerals that constantly and continually strengthened its cohesiveness. That's crazy. It's like the perfect crack-filling mechanism that gets stronger when salt water is present. And what did the Hopi chief say about these tunnels in LA again? They were dug with powerful chemicals and connected to the ocean, the salt water. Okay, so there's nothing impossible to believe about that part of their legend because we already know ancient people developed concrete better than our own today. And if I were worried my townspeople could be destroyed by fire, I might take them underground too. But now that I was more open to the idea of a fortified underground city being doable, I wanted to know, what was the most interesting part of the Hopi legend? Did Shufelt find anything underground that matched up with it? This is where the story started getting into the ancient Maya and the buried treasure of Hollywood. Buried treasure of Hollywood. Yeah. Chief Greenleaf told Shufelt that the lost city of the lizard people was laid out like a lizard, and these people saw the lizard as a symbol of long life. And that's when it all clicked for me. Could there have been a literal race of lizardy beings who lived in LA? Personally, I've heard of lizard cryptid encounters or alien sightings in history, and I'm pretty much open to anything. But when I heard that they viewed the lizard as a symbol, I realized these lizard people from the article could also have just been a race of humans who worshipped or valued lizards, and that's why they thought of themselves as the lizard people. The Aztec god Quetzalcoatl was a feathered serpent. The Maya had Kukulkan, and some think those are the same being. Mesoamerican cultures believed they came from serpent gods, or at least valued the symbolism so much that they built lizard symbols into their temples' architecture. So were these lizard people who built the civilization under LA actually precursors to the Maya 5,000 years before 1934? The Maya were so sophisticated they built some of the largest structures in modern history, like the temples at Tikal in Guatemala or the Pyramid of the Sun in Mexico. Maybe you just picture Indiana Jones-style temples in the middle of the jungle or primitive people in loincloths when you think of the Maya, but you have to realize that the people of the past actually made vast city complexes. These buildings were once pristine and white, and the Maya structures, walls, were made of limestone. Again, limestone. So the Maya civilization was another culture that knew how strong the properties of lime were, just like the lizard people's catacomb city in Hollywood. And you can find serpent symbolism in these Maya structures, of course, like the lizard people apparently valued. Neither of these were primitive peoples at all. And that civilization would have been massive if the Maya and their precursors were in the Central American area, Mexico, and all the way up to California. Think about how much land that would cover. Honestly, this would change everything. But let me bring it back to the tunnels in LA because it's all connected to this buried treasure. Hopi legend said that there was a key room of the lizard people's ancient city, and Shufelt believed the legend predicted it would be found directly under South Broadway near 2nd Street. This key room would be a directory to all parts of the city and have golden tablets 4 feet long and 14 inches wide with the lizard people's records on them. Again, this is according to the Hopi legend. Here's the prophecy, or more accurately, the Hopi history that Shufelt used to find this location in more detail. Quote, "On these tablets of gold, gold having been the symbol of life to the legendary lizard people, will be found the recorded history of the Mayans, and on one particular tablet, the southwest corner of which will be missing, is to be found the record of the origin of the human race." That's crazy. So what would you do? I'd go get my radio x-ray equipment, a team of helpers, some digging equipment, and start drilling. And that's exactly what geophysical mining engineer G. Warren Shufelt did. He said he took x-ray pictures of 37 such tablets in the key room below LA. 3 of which had their southwest corners cut off, like the prophecy predicted. Quote, "My radio X-ray pictures of tunnels and rooms, which are subsurface voids, and of gold pictures with perfect corners, sides, and ends, are scientific proof of their existence," Shufelt said. However, the legendary story must remain speculative until unearthed by excavation. So the Hopi legend was confirmed with geology equipment in the 1930s, but that wasn't the end. The chief told Shufelt that the lizard people's intelligence was much higher than modern man, and that 9-year-old children and their civilization were the equivalent of college graduates in the 1930s. I mean, that's nuts, considering how incredibly intelligent people in the 1930s were. The lizard people's science was so advanced that in addition to perfecting a chemical solution to bore underground without hauling out earth and rocks, they also developed a cement far stronger and better than any in use in modern times, with which they lined their tunnels and rooms. That totally corroborates what I said earlier about ancient Roman cement having healing powers. And that lime was part of it, and that the Maya lined their walls with limestone as well. Okay, so now you're probably wondering, how did Shufelt know where to look for this lost city in the first place? American Indians had passed down that the lost city could be found in an area with a chain of hills forming the frog of a horse's foot. Now, the frog is the triangular part on the underside of a horse's foot, if you're unfamiliar with that term. So Shufelt was looking for some hills that match this description. Well, LA certainly has hills around it, and Shufelt thought the exact region he dug in matched this description perfectly. Just look at this map of the underground city that was published in 1934. He figured out this ancient city was under Hollywood. Well, some of you might be asking, Rob, what do you think? Well, the most bizarre part of all of this for me has to do with the history of LA and Hollywood. So bear with me for a minute while I go through that. There was actually a family that donated the land to help develop Hollywood, and then real estate developers, of course, and businessmen started working on it. It's widely known that plans for the new town were shared with the publisher of the Los Angeles Times in the late 1800s. Hollywood as we know it took off shortly after, and the movie industry was certainly in full swing by the 1930s when this article about lizard people's tunnels was published. Now, the Los Angeles Times is the news organization who published this story in the first place. And if you look at where their building is today, it appears to be exactly above where the key room was reportedly situated in the underground city under South Broadway near 2nd Street. So did the LA Times know what was beneath their building? Is it an unlikely coincidence that they reported on an incredible story that led right to their own front door? Was it all a well-researched hoax or a practical joke that we're just finding now in the nearly 100 years since the article was published? Now, regardless of this particular article, obviously continents shift. Land masses rise and sink beneath the depths. Eventually, we build monuments, buildings, and skyscrapers. Then a natural catastrophe comes along and wipes out part of the population who has to build them all again. This has happened over and over for millennia. So honestly, I think fragments of broken pottery or sculptures buried in the sand aren't the only things that remain from ancient civilizations. Regardless of whether lizard people once lived beneath LA or still live there today, an extensive history of humanity itself could potentially be found at archaeological sites way beyond what we're seeing in museums. And these uncovered mysteries could reveal truths much more mind-blowing and cosmic than we think. What do you think we'll find if we look in remote jungles under ancient Maya complexes, or even in our own backyards? Leave me a comment with what else you think is out there, or if you found evidence yourself. My co-host John Vivanco and I had a conversation on the Metaphysical podcast where we dived into more details of the lizard people's catacomb city during our larger series on the ancient civilization of Lemuria and Mount Shasta, so definitely check that out for more. If you like this episode, please consider supporting my work by pledging on our website, themetaphysical.tv. Yeah, we don't do that Patreon stuff. We give you back more. With your help, I can make more videos, more merch, which I designed, and also more exclusive episodes that are going up on that website. You can also get a bag of delicious Metaphysical coffee every month if you want your mornings to be interstellar by visiting the link in the description. In fact, our coffee is 100% Arabica non-GMO Guatemalan coffee right from the Maya's front door. So you can tell me if it tastes like a Mesoamerican sunrise. Remember to like and subscribe to help the channel grow as well. And with that, I hope you thought this episode was out of this world.